The great chamber was filled with aliens. From 47 different species, they came in. All shapes and sizes. Some had scales. Some had feathers, some looked like nothing humans had ever imagined. They sat in floating chairs arranged in a massive circle, and today they were all laughing. Commander Velithorn stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, with shiny green scales that changed color when he felt strong emotions. Right now they flickered with amusement as he showed images on a giant floating screen. Look at this, he said, pointing to a human battleship. They still use chemical rockets. They burn fuel to move through space. My species stopped doing this 10,000 years ago. Laughter filled the chamber. Velith continued, their weapons are even more amusing. They use explosions to push metal pieces at their enemies. Explosions like children playing with fire. More laughter. Louder this time. In the far corner of the chamber sat a human woman. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she was Earth's only representative in the galactic Concord. She had brown skin, tired eyes, and gray hair that she kept short. She did not laugh. She did not smile. She simply watched and listened. Elena had been coming to this chamber for 15 years. In all that time, humanity had never been given full membership. They were considered too young, too violent, too primitive. She had argued for her people countless times. She had shown them human art, human music, human philosophy. None of it mattered to the conquered. Humans were just clever animals who had somehow learned to fly between stars. Their most powerful weapons are nuclear missiles. Velith said, nuclear. They still split atoms for energy. They are centuries behind us, perhaps millennia. The Kethvari ambassador, creature with 4 arms and blue skin, raised his hand. What about their electromagnetic technology? Our scouts detected strange energy readings near their colonies. Velith waved his hand dismissively. Primitive magnetic systems, probably for mining or construction. Nothing of military value. Elena kept her face completely still. Inside, her heart was beating fast. They had noticed something, but they had not understood what they noticed. Good. Leader of the Rathani hegemony stood up. His name was High Commander Dreth, and he was massive. His species looked like walking mountains with gray rocky skin and eyes that glowed like hot coals. When he spoke, the chamber fell silent. I have heard enough, Dreth said. The human solar system contains valuable resources, rare metals, clean water, habitable moons. The Arthani hegemony claims this territory. Elena stood up quickly. You cannot do this. Earth is our home. We have rights under conquered law. Dreth looked at her like she was an insect. Conquered law protects member species. Humans are not members. You are observers. You have no rights. Elena looked around the chamber, searching for support. She found none. Some aliens looked away. Others smiled. Most simply did not care. We will defend ourselves, Elena said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. This time the laughter was loudest of all. With what? Fleth asked. Your exploding missiles, your chemical rockets. He shook his head. Ambassador, please do not embarrass yourself. When the Rathani fleet arrives, your people should simply surrender. It will be less painful for everyone. The vote happened quickly. 47 species, 47 votes in favor of the Rathani claim, 0 against. Elena walked out of the chamber alone. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. When she reached her small office, she sat down and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she opened a secure communication channel. The signal would take hours to reach Earth, bouncing through secret relay stations that the Conquered did not know existed. Her message was short. They are coming, all of them. Execute Protocol Omega on Earth. The message arrived in the middle of the night. It was received by a young officer in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. He read it twice, then ran to wake his commander. Within 1 hour, the message had reached every human military installation in the solar system. On the moon, massive doors began to open. They had been hidden beneath the gray dust for decades, built in secret, never used. Behind those doors were ships, hundreds of ships, black and angular, covered in armor plates. On Europa, one of Jupiter's frozen moons, similar doors opened beneath the ice. More ships emerged, rising through clouds of steam as their engines melted the ice around them. In the asteroid belt, hollowed out rocks came to life. These were not mining stations, as the Conquered believed. They were weapons platforms, each one carrying a device that humanity had spent 50 years perfecting. They called them rail guns. The idea was simple: take a piece of metal, use powerful magnets to push it faster and faster along a track, release it at incredible speed. No explosions, no fuel, just pure electromagnetic force, accelerating a projectile until it became the most destructive weapon the galaxy, the Conquered, had dismissed. This technology, they called it primitive. They said it was inefficient. They believed their energy shields could stop anything. They were wrong. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, the largest ship in Earth's secret fleet. She was 62 years old, with silver hair and a scar across her left cheek from a training accident. Decades ago, she had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Status report, she said, all ships responding. Her first officer replied, 4,000 vessels ready for deployment, rail gun batteries charged and operational. Tanaka nodded slowly. 4,000 ships. It was still much smaller than the Arthani Armada, which numbered over 200 vessels. But numbers were not everything. Send a message to Ambassador Vasquez, Tanaka said. Tell her the children are ready to play with fire. Far across the galaxy, Alina received the message. For the first time in 15 years, she smiled. The Conquered had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen only what they expected to see: primitive rockets, explosive weapons, young species still learning to walk among the stars. They had not seen the secret shipyards. They had not understood the strange energy readings. They had not imagined that a species they considered primitive could build something that would change everything. The Rithani were coming with their massive fleet and their advanced technology and their absolute confidence. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the cold darkness of space. Humanity prepared for war, not the war the Conquered expected, not a desperate last stand by a primitive species, something else entirely. The Rethani Armada emerged from fold space like a swarm of metal insects. 1,200 warships appeared above Mars in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. It was the largest fleet the Rathani had ever assembled for a conquest. Admiral Cathos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old for Arthani, with cracks running through his rocky skin. Like dried riverbeds, his glowing eyes surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. Beautiful, he said, simply. Beautiful. Around him his officers worked at their stations, weapons. Systems came online, shields activated. With a soft hum, communication arrays began scanning human frequencies. Admiral, his communication officer said, "We are receiving transmissions from Earth." Put them on speaker. The bridge filled with human voices, crying, screaming prayers in dozens of languages, news broadcasts describing panic in the streets, government officials begging their people to remain calm. Keith listened with pleasure. This was always his favorite part of a conquest, the fear, the desperation, the moment when a primitive species realized it had no hope. They sound afraid, his tactical officer observed, as they should be. Cathros replied, "Has their fleet responded?" "Yes, Admiral. Approximately 200 vessels are moving to intercept. They will arrive within the hour. 200 ships against 1,200. Cathros almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The Galactic Concord had sent observers to document the conquest. 3 officials from different species sat in special chairs on the bridge, recording everything with their devices. This was standard procedure. The Concord liked to keep records of how primitive species were brought into the fold. This should not take long, Cathos told them. Human weapons cannot penetrate Ronnie's shields. We will disable their fleet, occupy their planets, and begin resource extraction within the week. The observers nodded politely. They had seen this before many times on the UES Defiance. Admiral Tanaka watched the Rithani fleet on her tactical display. 1,200 red dots arranged in a crescent formation, slowly advancing toward the inner solar system. They are not even trying to be subtle, her first officer said. Standard conquest formation. They expect no resistance. Good, Tanaka replied. Let them expect nothing. Human fleet was spread across the solar system. Only 200 ships moved to meet the Arthani directly. The rest waited in the shadows, hidden behind moons and asteroids, running silent with their systems powered down. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship. On screen, Cathros's face appeared on the main display. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. His rocky features were carved into a permanent expression of contempt. Human commander, he said, I am Admiral Cathos of the Arthani hegemony. Your solar system now belongs to us. Surrender your vessels, and your planets and your people will be treated fairly. Resist and you will be destroyed. Tanaka leaned forward in her chair. Admiral Cathos, I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the United Earth Navy. I must respectfully decline your offer. Keith tilted his head. You decline with 200 ships against 1,200. This is not courage, human. This is stupidity. Perhaps, Tanaka said, but we have a saying on Earth, never judge a book by its cover. I do not understand this phrase. You will. The transmission ended. Keith stared at the blank screen. For a moment, something about the human commander bothered him. She had not seemed afraid. Her voice had been calm, confident, almost amused. He pushed the thought away. What did it matter? Confidence would not stop plasma cannons. Courage would not penetrate Rathani shields. All ships, he commanded, advance and prepare for combat. Weapons free when in range. The Arthani Armada moved forward like a great wave of steel on the Defiance Tanaka. Watch them come, the distance between the fleet shrank with every passing minute. Her crew worked silently at their stations, checking systems, running calculations, preparing for what was about to happen. Rail gun status, she asked. Main battery fully charged. Her weapons officer replied, targeting solutions ready. We have firing angles on 47 enemy vessels, 47 with one shot each. After that they would need to recharge, but that first shot was going to matter. It was going to matter more than any shot ever fired in human history. Enemy fleet entering maximum range. Tactical reported. Tanaka stood up. She straightened her uniform. She thought about her parents who had died, believing humanity would never reach the stars. She thought about her daughter, who was right now hiding in a bunker on Earth, waiting to see if her mother would save the world. No pressure. All ships, she said into the fleet-wide communication channel. This is Admiral Tanaka. For decades we have been told that we are primitive, that our weapons are toys, that we have no place among the stars. She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew, young men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show the galaxy what humanity can do. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every species that has ever been conquered by those who believed themselves superior. On every ship in the fleet, crews listened in silence. Hold your fire until my command, Tanaka continued. Make every shot count, and remember why we are here. Not for glory, not for revenge, for the simple right to exist, for the right to live free among the stars. She sat back down in her command chair. Now, let us teach them a lesson they will never forget. The two fleets closed the distance, 10,000 km, 5,000, 1,000. The Rithani opened fire first. Plasma bolts streak across the void, brilliant green and blue, impacting against human shield. The Defiance shuddered as energy washed over its hull. Shields holding. Engineering reported minor fluctuations. Keith watched with satisfaction. Their shields are weak. Continue firing. This will be over soon. But the human ships did not fire back. They absorbed hit after hit, their shields flickering but not failing. They continued to advance. Why are they not shooting? The Arthani tactical officer asked. Cathros frowned. It was a good question. Any sensible commander would return fire immediately. What were the humans waiting for on the Defiance? Tanaka's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Waiting just a little closer. Optimal firing range in 10 seconds. Weapons reported. All ships lock targets. 5 seconds. Tanaka took a deep breath. 2 seconds. 1. Optimal range achieved. All ships, Tanaka said, her voice steady as steel. Fire, and everything changed. The Defiance shuddered as its main rail gun fired. There was no explosion, no bright flash of energy, just a deep vibration that every crew member felt in their bones, followed by a sound like thunder rolling through the ship's hull. A single tungsten rod, 2 m long and weighing 2 tons, erupted from the ship's spine at 3% the speed of light. It crossed the distance to the enemy fleet in less than a heartbeat. The Arthani dreadnought, glorious conquest, was 800 m long. It had shields that could stop plasma cannons, armor that could survive nuclear explosions, a crew of 3,000 soldiers. None of it mattered. The tungsten rod hit the ship like the fist of an angry god. It punched through the shields as if they were made of paper. It tore through the armor like a knife through water. It passed through the reactor core without slowing down. And then it kept going. The glorious conquest did not explode, it simply came apart. One moment it was a warship, the next moment it was an expanding cloud of molten metal and debris. The tungsten rod continued on its path, moving so fast that it hit the cruiser behind the dreadnought and destroyed that ship too. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Cathos stared at his tactical display. Two of his ships had vanished. Just vanished in the time it took him to blink. What? He whispered. Then the rest of the human fleet fired. 200 rail guns spoke at once. 200 tungsten projectiles flew across the void. Each one carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. Each one was moving too fast for shields to stop, too dense for armor to resist. The Rathani formation became a graveyard. Ships exploded in chains. A projectile would destroy one vessel, continue through, and another behind it. In some cases, a single shot killed 3 ships before finally losing momentum. The void filled with fire and wreckage and the screaming voices of dying crews. In 11 seconds, 340 Rathani warships were destroyed. Admiral Cathos could not move. He could not speak. He could only watch as his beautiful fleet was torn apart by weapons that should not exist, weapons that made no sense, weapons that his people had dismissed as primitive toys. Admiral, his tactical officer shouted. Orders, we need orders, Cathos said. Nothing, his mind refused to process what was happening on the Defiance. Admiral Tanaka's voice cut through all frequencies. It was broadcast to every ship in both fleets, translated into every language known to the conquered. This is the United Earth ship Defiance. To all Rathani vessels, you have entered sovereign human space without permission. You have attacked our ships without provocation. You now have 60 seconds to begin your retreat, or we will continue firing. The conquered observers on the Eternal Dominion were frozen in their seats. Their recording devices captured everything, every explosion, every death, every moment of the impossible battle. One of them, a Keth diplomat named Sorrel, found his voice. Those weapons, what are those weapons? Keith finally spoke. His voice sounded old, broken. Kinetic accelerators, magnetic propulsion. We knew they had the technology. We thought. He stopped, unable to continue. You thought it was primitive, Sorrel finished. 45 seconds remained. Some Arthani captains began turning their ships. They did not wait for orders. They saw what was happening, and they ran, but most of the fleet held position, either too loyal or too shocked to retreat. Admiral, his first officer, said, we should withdraw. We cannot fight this. Withdraw. Keith turned to face him and tell the hegemony what? That we lost half our fleet to primitives, that our shields are useless against rocks. We can tell them the truth. We can warn them. 30 seconds. Cathros looked at the tactical display again. His fleet was in chaos. Ships drifted without power. Escape pods filled the void. The human fleet sat untouched, waiting. All ships, he finally said. Full retreat. Jump to fold space immediately, but it was too late. Time expired. Tanaka announced. The human fleet fired again. This time there was no warning, no mercy. The rail guns had recharged during the 60 seconds of waiting, and now they spoke with full fury. Admiral Keith watched as the ships around him died. The Eternal Dominion shook violently as debris struck its hull. Alarm system screamed. Crew members shouted damage reports. Fold. Space drive is offline. Engineering reported we cannot jump. Another wave of tungsten death flew through the fleet. The Eternal Dominion's sister ship, the Absolute Victory, took a direct hit and broke in half. Keith Rose saw the explosion reflected in the eyes of his terrified crew. Emergency power 2 engines, he commanded. Get us out of here. Any direction, just move. The great dreadnought turned and ran. It was the largest ship in the Rathani fleet. Once a symbol of unmatched power, now it fled like a wounded animal, surrounded by the burning wreckage of its companions. The battle lasted 14 minutes. In total, when it ended, 1,147 Rathani warships were destroyed. 53 managed to escape into fold space, including the damaged Eternal Dominion. Human losses were 6 ships destroyed and 18 damaged. On the Defiance, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had won. They had actually won against the greatest military power in the sector. Against 1,200 advanced warships. Admiral Tanaka stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. Her hands were shaking. She had commanded fleets and simulations 1,000 times, but this was real. All those ships, all those lives. She pushed the thoughts away. There would be time for reflection later. Send a message to Earth, she said. Tell them the battle is over. We are victorious. A cheer erupted on the bridge. It spread through the ship, then through the fleet. Soldiers hugged each other. Some cried, some laughed, some simply stared into space, unable to believe what they had done. Far away on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kathos sat alone in his quarters. His fleet was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His species had just suffered the worst military defeat in their history, and it had happened because they had laughed at the wrong species. He thought about the human commanders' words, never judge a book by its cover. He understood the phrase now. He understood it very well. The conquered observers were already transmitting their recordings. Within hours, every species in the galaxy would know what had happened. They would see the impossible battle. They would watch the mighty Rathani fall to primitive weapons. Everything was about to change, and humanity was just getting started. The Galactic Conquered Assembly had never been so loud. Representatives from 47 species shouted at each other across the great chamber. Accusations flew in dozens of languages. Diplomats who had been allies for centuries now screamed in each other's faces. The entire structure of galactic politics was crumbling, and everyone was looking for someone to blame. Commander Velithorn stood at the center of the chaos. His scales had turned a dark shade of gray, a sign of deep stress among his species. Just days ago, he had stood in this same spot and mocked human technology. He had called them primitive. He had laughed at their weapons. Now those weapons had destroyed the largest fleet in Rathani history. This is your fault, the Arthani ambassador roared, pointing at Velith. Your intelligence reports said they posed no threat. The reports were accurate. Velith shouted back. Their technology appeared primitive. How was I supposed to know they had enough? The voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked to the center of the Chamber. She moved slowly, calmly, as if she had all the time in the world. The chaos faded to silence as species after species stopped to watch her. Alina had never been given the right to speak in the main assembly. Humanity was not a member, they were only observers. But today no one tried to stop her. Today everyone wanted to hear what she had to say. You want to know how this happened, she said. Her voice was steady. You want to understand how a primitive species defeated the mighty Rathani. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of diplomats and commanders who had ignored her for 15 years. It is simple. You made assumptions. You looked at our chemical rockets and decided you knew everything about us. You saw what you wanted to see. Valve stepped forward. Your weapons should not work. Kinetic projectiles cannot penetrate modern shields. Physics simply do not allow it. Alina smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Your shields are designed to stop energy, she explained. Plasma lasers, particle beams, they absorb heat and disperse it into space. Very clever, very advanced. She paused, letting the words sink in. But our rail guns do not use energy, they use mass. A 2-ton piece of tungsten moving at 3% of light speed. Do you know how much kinetic energy that carries? No one answered. Enough to destroy a mountain, Alina continued. And here is the thing about kinetic energy. You cannot absorb it. You cannot disperse it. You cannot redirect it. It simply transfers from the projectile to the target. Your shields try to stop it and the projectile goes right through. Your armor tries to resist it and the armor becomes part of the explosion. She let that settle over the assembly. We did not trick you. We did not hide some secret technology. We simply perfected something you had abandoned. You thought kinetic weapons were primitive, so you never developed defenses against them. You assumed that any species using kinetic weapons must be weak. You were wrong. The Kethar ambassador rose from his seat. You deceived the conquered. You made us believe you were harmless. Did we? Alina asked. When did we ever say we were harmless? You decided that on your own. We simply did not correct you. She walked to the center display and activated it. Images appeared showing human shipyards, orbital defense platforms, and weapons installations. Humanity has 4,000 railgun equipped warships. We have defensive platforms around every colony in our system. We have weapons that you have not even detected yet. Murmur spread through the chamber. But here is what I want you to understand, Alina continued. We did not build these weapons to conquer anyone. We built them because we knew someday someone would come to conquer us. We watched the conquered for decades. We saw how you treated species you considered primitive. We knew our turn would come. She turned off the display. The Arthani attacked us. We defended ourselves. That is all we have. No interest in your territory. We have no desire for revenge. We simply want to be left alone. High Commander Dreth, who had proposed the annexation of Earth, spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, defeated. What are your terms? Terms? Alina raised an eyebrow. We did not start this war, but we will end it. The Arthani hegemony will pay reparations for the lives lost in your unprovoked attack. You will formally recognize human sovereignty over our solar system and all our colonies, and you will broadcast a public apology across all conquered channels. That is humiliating, Dreth said. So was being told we had no right to exist. Silence filled the chamber. Elena looked around. One last time, she saw fear in the eyes of species that had never feared anything. She saw respect from those who had offered only contempt. She saw a galaxy realizing that everything it believed was wrong. We are not your enemies, she said. We never wanted to be, but we will not be your victims either. Remember that when you make your decisions about the future. She walked toward the exit. Before she reached the door, she stopped and turned back. One more thing, many of you are probably thinking about how to develop defenses against our weapons, how to create shields that can stop kinetic projectiles, how to catch up to our technology. She smiled again. Go ahead and try, but remember this: we perfected the rail gun in 50 years while hiding from your observation. We did it with technology you considered primitive. Imagine what we can do now that we do not need to hide anymore. She left the chamber. Behind her, the assembly remained silent for several minutes. No one spoke, no one moved. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on every representative in the room. The old order was dead. For millennia, the conquered had operated on simple rules. Advanced species dominated primitive ones. Technology determined power. Those who controlled energy weapons controlled the galaxy, but humanity had broken those rules. They had shown that power came in many forms, that innovation could beat tradition, that the species everyone dismissed as primitive could become the most dangerous force in that sector. In the following hours, emergency meetings were called across the galaxy. Military commanders rewrote their strategies. Scientists began studying kinetic physics. Diplomats prepared new approaches to dealing with Earth. And in her small office, far from the chaos she had caused, Elena Vasquez poured herself a drink and allowed herself to feel proud. They had done it. They had actually done it. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with their victory. The Rathani hegemony surrendered within 1 week. Their ambassador came to Earth personally, traveling in a small diplomatic vet. With no weapons and no escort, he landed in Geneva, walked into the United Nations building, and signed every document that humanity put in front of him. Full reparations for the battle, recognition of human sovereignty, formal apology broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The mighty Rathani, who had conquered dozens of species, bent their knee to the primitives they had tried to destroy. But humanity's response surprised everyone. President Maria Chen addressed the galactic conquered via quantum communication. Her image appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds, translated into 1,000 languages. For decades, humanity sought acceptance among the stars. She said, we wanted to join your conquered. We wanted to be your partners. We believed that cooperation was better than conflict. She paused, her dark eyes hard as stone. You refused us. You mocked us. You voted to take our home and divide it among yourselves. And when we asked for mercy, you laughed. Leaders across the galaxy shifted uncomfortably. Now you come to us with gifts, with trade offers, with promises of friendship. President Chen shook her head slowly. Where was this friendship when we needed it? Where was this kindness when we begged for understanding? She straightened in her chair. Humanity rejects your offers, all of them. We do not need your technology. We do not need your markets. We certainly do not need your friendship. We have learned to survive on our own. And we will continue to do so. Ambassadors from a dozen species tried to interrupt. Chan ignored them. Earth is establishing a sovereign zone, extending 50 light years from our sun. Any vessel entering this space without permission will receive one warning. There will not be a second warning. This is not negotiable. She leaned forward, and her voice became cold. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. Congratulations, we learned the lesson. Now live with the consequences. The transmission ended across the Concord. The reaction was immediate. Some species were outraged, others were terrified. Many tried to open new diplomatic channels to find some way to reach the humans. All attempts were politely refused. The years passed. Humanity turned inward. They expanded within their sovereign zone, colonizing new worlds, building new stations, growing stronger with each passing decade. They traded with no one. They allied with no one. They simply existed, a mystery at the heart of known space, and the galaxy watched. Stories spread among younger generations, tales of the kinetic species, the rock throwers who had humiliated the greatest fleet in living memory. Some versions made humanity sound like monsters, others painted them as heroes. All agreed on one thing: you did not want to make the humans angry. Militaramies across the Concord added new courses to their programs: kinetic weapons theory, mass-based defense systems, the physics of primitive technology. Officers who had spent their careers studying energy weapons now struggled to understand concepts that human engineers considered basic. Commander Velith was removed from his position and sent home in disgrace. His intelligence failures had contributed to the worst military defeat in Arthani history. His scales turned permanently gray, and he spent his remaining years in quiet study. He read everything he could find about humanity, their history, their wars, their strain culture. He learned about species that had clawed their way up from nothing, surviving ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have destroyed most civilizations. He found an old human saying that stayed with him until his death: speak softly and carry a big stick. The humans had been speaking softly for a very long time. They had smiled politely in the Concord chamber. They had accepted insults with grace. They had never threatened anyone, but all along they had been building the biggest stick the galaxy had ever seen. On Earth, life continued. Admiral Tanaka retired from active service and wrote her memoirs. They became required reading at every human military academy. She died peacefully at the age of 93, surrounded by grandchildren who had never known a time when humanity was afraid. Ambassador Vasquez returned to Earth and served 2 terms as Secretary General of the United Nations. She spent her later years teaching young diplomats the art of patience, of playing the long game, of surviving among those who considered you weak. The Defiance was preserved as a museum ship orbiting Earth as a permanent reminder of the day everything changed. Millions visited each year to walk its corridors and touch the great rail gun that had fired the first shot, but perhaps the greatest change happened far from Earth, in a small school on a distant Cathay colony. A teacher stood before her young students, showing them images of human ships. Why are we learning about them? One student asked. They are just one species. The teacher smiled sadly. Because they taught us something important. They taught us that what we see is not always what exists. that the weak can become strong, that assuming you know everything is the fastest path to disaster, she changed the image to show the wreckage of the Arthani fleet. They also taught us that the galaxy is larger than we imagined, that there are ideas we have not considered, technologies we have not explored, possibilities we have not dreamed of. She looked at our students with ancient eyes. Perhaps someday one of you will discover the next great idea that everyone else dismissed as primitive. The students listened in silence. They would carry this lesson with them for the rest of their lives, and in the shadows of the galaxy, other species began to wonder if the humans had been hiding rail guns. What else might they be hiding? If primitive technology could defeat advanced shields, what other old ideas deserved a second look? The era of easy assumptions was over. The age of careful observation had begun. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not sought revenge or demanded tribute. They had simply shown everyone what they could do and then walked away. Perhaps that was the most terrifying thing of all. They did not need to prove themselves anymore. They did not need to fight for respect. They had earned their place among the stars in the most dramatic way possible. Now they sat in their sovereign zone, peaceful and quiet, watching the galaxy scramble to understand them, speaking softly, carrying their big stick, and waiting to see what happened next.